As the movie begins, we see a red object falling at high speed from the sky toward a thick forest. In the woods, a deer wanders around grazing when it's suddenly attacked by a tentacled creature, making it squeal until it's finally quiet. Days later, a couple, Ruth and Harry, are on a road in Harry's Jeep and are heading out on a special camping trip. After a long trip, they take a break at a roadside diner close to the forest known as Bigfoot Burger Shack. Harry gets his girlfriend something vegetarian on the menu, but warns her that it might not be very good. The couple finishes up their meal and heads out to the bottom of the trail, and when they get there, Ruth seems too nervous to go through the hike, and her crippling anxiety gets the better of her. Harry calms her down, telling her that they could stay in the car for a bit longer, and that once she starts the road, she wouldn't be nervous. He tells her that it was his 4th time doing the trial, and that there was nothing scary about it. And trusting her boyfriend, Ruth gets out of the car and they start their journey, and as they walk through the woods, Ruth asks Harry about his first kiss, and he tells her the hilarious story, explaining how bad it was. After a few hours of travel, the couple set up camp, and Harry starts making their dinner while Ruth struggles to build their tent. That night, Ruth wakes up from sleep and heads out of the tent to pee, and suddenly, she senses something behind her and flashes the light into the woods while panicking. While looking up ahead, she sees a deer standing there just staring at her before Harry touches her, scaring her even more. She tells him that she had gotten up to relieve herself and had felt like she'd seen something lurking about. Harry doesn't think too much of it, and the two go back to sleep, and the next morning, the couple continue up the trail until they finally reach the top of the hill overlooking the ocean, a sight that leaves Ruth breathless. Harry's happy that Ruth loves the sight and tells her that before he met her 6 years ago, he didn't really have a plan for his life, and after the two had started dating, everything changed for him, giving him purpose. Harry then kneels in front of his girlfriend with a ring in his hand and asks her to marry him. Suddenly, Ruth starts to experience terrible anxiety, making her stagger toward the edge and almost falling. Harry catches her just in time, but she panically tells him to let her go. When she finally calms down, she tells Harry that she apologizes and tells him that she won't be able to marry him. Harry's crushed by her answer, but chooses not to say anything, giving her the space that she needed. Later, while Henry sets up their tent, Ruth tries to speak to him about what happened, but he apologizes and tells her that they don't have to talk about it. Angry, Ruth asks him why he had done what he did after they already talked about her disinterest in marriage. Harry explains that he had agreed with her back then because he didn't want to push her away, but believed enough time had passed for her to be okay with it. He tells her that they weren't parents and that what they had was good, and the couple continues to have an argument until Ruth finally snaps, telling Harry to shut up. The next morning, Ruth finds a note Harry had left, explaining that he had gone for a walk to clear his head and that he won't be long. After making herself coffee, Ruth tries to call her therapist but couldn't find any signal. Trying to find a network, she starts walking around the forest until she happens upon a mutilated body of a deer covered with some type of black substance. Disgusted with the sight, Ruth starts walking away from it when she bumps into Harry, who calms her down. After assuring her that the deer wasn't the one from the night before, the two return back to their campsite. While sitting around the fire, Harry continues to reassure his girlfriend that whatever killed the animal wouldn't bother them. Harry continues to apologize for making things awkward between them, but Ruth assures him that she loves him and that nothing would change between them. The couple then agree that they wouldn't let anything change until she is good and ready. The two woke up happy and made up the next morning, and while Harry makes their breakfast, Ruth tells him that she was going for a little stroll and leaves. After walking around for a bit, Ruth comes across a cave where she finds small droplets of a glowing blue substance. Curious, she walks deeper into the cave and tries to look around, and on one spot she finds a concentrated amount of the gooey substance and pokes at it with a stick. While Ruth kneels inspecting the substance, she hears something behind her and turns around, and she starts to scream because of the unexpected sight. Out at the campsite, Harry's worried that Ruth had been gone for so long, so he heads out to look for her. He calls out her name for a while until he finds her standing in the middle of the woods. Harry tells Ruth that she was gone for half an hour and that he was worried about her, and she apologizes for worrying him, and the two head back to finish the rest of their breakfast. Having had their meal, Ruth and Harry continue their trekking up the mountain for hours until they find a suitable place to spend the night. Harry wakes up to Ruth missing yet again from his side and goes out looking for her until she startles him in the middle of the woods with a knife in her hand and tells him him that she heard an animal. Returning his pocket knife to Harry, she returns to the tent and spends the night wide awake. Ruth sits on a log, strangely quiet as her boyfriend packs up their stuff. He tells her that he might be promoted to vice principal at the school that he works at, and ignoring what he was saying, Ruth apologizes for being so weird that night before and tells him that she was wrong and asks him to propose to her again. She tells him that she wants to feel like it's the first time and asks him to take her to the same place where he had first popped the question. Happy, Harry agrees and takes her to the hill overlooking the ocean, and when they got there, he gets on one knee and asks Ruth if she would be willing to spend the rest of her life with him. Ruth agrees to the proposal, and he gets up to put the ring on her fingers, telling her that it looked beautiful on her. Ruth kisses her now fiancé, telling him that she loved him, but then she hits him on the groin with her leg and pushes him over the edge of the cliff, letting him plummet down the rocky floor. Ruth starts running as fast as she can down the trail that they'd initially climbed, and after hours of running, she felt dizzy and falls, hitting her head on a rock. She awakens to other hikers, a husband and wife, checking up on her, and after giving her some water for her dehydration, they ask her what happened to her, and she tells them that she doesn't remember. The husband, Ray, tries to call the police but couldn't find a signal on his phone, so his wife suggests that Ruth should come with them to their campsite. Ray's wife, Vivian, gives the lost girl something to eat, telling her that they would be heading back with her first thing in the morning. Hoping that Ruth would remember something, Vivian asks more questions, but she couldn't get anything out of the girl. Afraid that she was stressing her out, Vivian decides to change the subject and asks Ruth what her hobbies were. When Ruth mentions surfing, the woman explains that she and her husband also love that sport as well, but the last time they went there to surf, there were too many sharks. When she still doesn't get a response from the girl, Vivian wakes up her husband and tells him that there was something wrong with Ruth and that they can't wait to call the police. Seeing her chance, Ruth picks up the knife Ray had left lying around, and when they see the sharp object in the girl's hand, the couple get scared and ask her to put it down. Then suddenly, they all hear a sound coming from behind them, and Ruth is shocked to see Harry walking toward her. Shaking with fear, Ruth tells the older couple that it was him and runs away. Ray tries to keep Harry at bay, telling him to stay where he was, but he doesn't listen. Ray tries to throw a punch, but a long sharp knife-looking thing erupts from Harry's fingers and slices Ray's hand clean off. Sarcastically, Harry thanks Ray for finding Ruth and then slices the man's body in half. Vivian, who'd assumed the man that they just encountered was the girl's abusive boyfriend, catches up to Ruth, who confirms that the thing out there wasn't really Harry. The older woman is confused but calms down a bit after she hears her husband's voice. Ruth begs Vivian to stay with her, but the woman decides to go to Ray instead. Vivian encounters her husband's severed body with Harry right behind it, but gets attacked before having the chance to escape. Harry calls out to Ruth and threatens to kill Vivian unless she comes out. When Ruth reveals herself, Harry goes back on his word and murders Vivian, then asks her how she found out about him. Ruth explains that she found the cave where he had taken Harry and wrapped him up in a cocoon, his head severed in two before impersonating him. When she ran out of the cave, struggling with a panic attack, she ran into the monster that changed himself into Harry. Although she was scared, Ruth wanted to find out some answers, and she asks Harry's impersonator what he was. The alien explains that he was a scout who arrives at a planet first and then reports back to his kind before a full-blown invasion begins. Harry is angry at himself for telling her this and tries to kill Ruth, but the love that the real Harry had for Ruth had been transferred into the alien, making him question his actions. He repeatedly tries to end her life but is unable to when she starts to beg him to let her go. He realizes that he had fallen in love with Ruth and becomes frustrated, and as Harry turns around to sort out his emotions, Ruth uses the opportunity to run away. Harry starts following her, yelling that she doesn't have to worry because he would never hurt her. He eventually catches up to her and tells her that he understands that she is angry that he killed her boyfriend, and explains that she shouldn't be because he was the exact biological replica of the real Harry. He also tells her that it was the first time that he had felt love, and for some reason, it's now integrated itself into his system. Harry takes Ruth out to the beach and shows her the spaceship that he arrived in. Once he explains how much he cared about her and that he doesn't want to see her hurt, he tells her that there are many other aliens like him who would be arriving soon that had plans to invade the planet. He offers to take her away from Earth and give her an incredible life, and she agrees with him by letting him kiss her, but as soon as he's distracted, she grabs the pocket knife in his pocket and stabs him in the chest. Realizing that this wouldn't cause any damage, she runs toward the shark-infested water and dives in. As Harry follows her inside, his bleeding chest attracts a shark in the vicinity, which drags him away, giving her enough time to swim out. Ruth heads back to the trail and finds Ray and Vivian's campsite, and while she eats a piece of sausage that they left out, Harry, that was able able to escape the shark surprises her. After trying to convince her to be with him, Harry decides to take her to the same cave he had killed her boyfriend and suck out all her memories so he can impersonate her too. As she watches, Harry's body begins to reform into hers, inheriting all the pain and anxiety that she had lived with for many years. The newly transformed alien was gasping for air as it was experiencing a panic attack, and this gives Ruth enough time to break free from the cocoon, and the alien couldn't breathe and lies down on the ground with Ruth next to it. As she tells it to breathe, she grabs a large stone from her side and bashes the alien's skull in. Taking the car keys from the fallen body, Ruth hurries toward where they had parked their car. Back in the cave, the crushed skull of the alien that transformed itself into Ruth slowly begins to heal, closing up to its previous state. When Ruth finally makes it to the car, she starts it up and begins her journey back home, and on her way, she hears static on the radio, and her own voice comes through, telling her that there was nowhere for her to run. Then suddenly, hundreds of spaceships are seen covering the sky as they make their way toward Earth, ready to begin the invasion.